After that power pack session from our scientific advisor, we move on to three foremost and leading business leaders who will be talking to us about government and policy and how they can become enablers for this particular industry. Introducing, we have Mr. Gopal Srinivasan, who is the CMD of TVS Capital and a senior board member of IVCA. Mr. Srinivasan's entrepreneurial career spans over several decades, in which he has founded, steered, and scaled up over 10 new ventures across diverse business verticals. Passionate about fostering startups and mentoring young entrepreneurs, and is an avid angel investor. He is the founding member of the Chennai Angels as well as TIE Chennai, two of the premier angel investing networks in India. Welcome, sir. We have with us Mohandas Pai. His career spanning another 4 decades. Mr. Pai has worked in every aspect of business and has helped shape the venture and startup ecosystem. He's currently the chairman of Aaron Capital, chairman of Manipal Global Education, and is in the investment committee of 314 Capital. Welcome, sir. Good evening. And we have with us Mr. Gaurav Dalmia, who is the chairman of Dalmia Group Holdings, a holding company for business and financial assets, investing in private equity, real estate, public markets, structured debt. He is also the founder and chairman of Landmark Holdings, a real estate firm. Welcome, sir, and over to you for this wonderful and power pack session.
Thank you very much, Rochelle, and a very good evening to all of you on the third day of IBCA's Maximum India Conference. Truly, a better phrase could not have been chosen, and my compliments to the organizers for thinking of it. As we sit here at the end of nearly 2.5 days of deliberations, you've seen more than 10 keynote speakers, the finance minister, veterans, the best of bankers, businessmen, the head of Tata, who has just acquired Air India today, Mr. Uday Kotak, and just now I saw my eminent erudite colleague, I mean a friend, Mr. Vijayaraghavan speaking, the principal scientific advisor. So at this point, we want to take you into an interesting walk into the past and a little rabbit hole into the future. And that is, we stand today celebrating the 25th year, yes, ladies and gentlemen, 25th year of India's venture capital and fund regulations known as the VCF regulations, and the 8th year of the alternate investment fund or the AIF regulations. I realize how old I am when I read this out to you because having been involved in drafting some of these regulations, it means it was a long time ago. You know the numbers. You know how $45 billion has come this year. You know how many investments have taken place. $260 billion since 2011. More than 300 funds, 6 times more than 2019, and on and on. This has become an industry which is looked into by every single policy maker, leave alone every single startup founder or every single entrepreneur in the country. The question we want to address today is, as India gets to 5 trillion economy, we will need close to $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion, which is close to 100 lakh crore of an AIF pool, both in India and abroad. This compares with about 15 to 20 lakh crore, assuming 5 lakh is in India, 15 is overseas, which is what the ratios we're told to put. So we're finding that nearly 5x growth has to take place in the pool size, and the total amount of money put to work has also has to go up by a minimum of 3x to 150, 160 billion. So the question we want to address with my two friends here, both are good friends. Mohan has been a public policy voice in many, many different fields in addition to his professional career. And Gaurav is an amazing intellectual and a writer. His columns are sought after in Economic Times and Times of India and many other places. And many funds like us go to him to come and address our teams as well. So with these two friends, we want to explore what does it take to have a scalable architecture for the regulations of this country across our 5 regulators, SEBI, Income Tax, CBIC, MCA, and of course, RBI. Across these Pancha Pandavas who are surrounding us, or whatever the right Pancha regulator word is, how do we get a scalable architecture where we can have a friction-free growth in terms of regulation? Yeah, friction as it is in finding good investments, making good investments, raising funds. But how do we get this is what we want to explore today. So to start off, I want to ask a question. India is supposed India is our Matrabhumi. It's a Punya Bhumi. It's also a Karma Bhumi. Why is it that to get a world-class regulation framework, we have to create a foreign country inside India called IFSC, where we can get leverage on AIFs, where we can do co-investing, where we can do pretty much anything any other global GP can do, we can do. But why can't the arm Indian, all of us here in this room who live in the non-IFSC India, get it without going there? Is something which I look at and I wonder that if India can create such a fabulous regulation IFSC, just as it is created in UPI, just as it is created in CoWIN, just as it is created in Aadhaar, in so many different areas, why can't we do this for this industry at home is what we want to explore. So with this, I just want to first turn my attention to Gaurav and ask him this question. Gaurav, we were discussing earlier on today that in India, regulators go on the basis of distrust rather than trust. And you had some thoughts, and maybe we could explore, is that the genesis of the problems of such complex laws like 11 UAs and car rules of various kind? Gaurav?
So, Gopal, thank you. As we were discussing earlier today, I mean, we come from a colonial legacy. So, if you look at what we called our IAS officers, we call them district collectors. So, our institutions were shaped in our history for extractive purposes. And if you just go into economic history, Darren Asimoglu has suggested that wherever you have extractive institutions, you have challenges of their own kind, and India is suffering from some of that legacy. I think we've broken most of it, but I think we are suffering from some of that. Now, trust in societies is a very big factor for economic dynamism. And there are studies why America and Silicon Valley in particular are so successful, because these are high trust societies. There have been studies in Italy where they've compared northern Italy to southern Italy. Northern Italy is a more trusting part of Italy than southern Italy. That is why big businesses just happen to be in northern Italy. So I think these are sociological factors which take long time to change, and India is surely changing.
Yes.
Let me comment on the current state, the way I look at it as a businessman, and comment a little bit on Indian institutions, given this backdrop. So Indian institutions tend to respond better to a crisis. So most of our big economic reforms are in a framework of a crisis. Okay, that's when we act best and we do our best work sometimes. Secondly, if you look at change in India, if you look at heroism in India, you have individual heroism, a great police officer, a great politician, a great IAS officer, in an otherwise mediocre institution. So our institutional setup is actually quite mediocre. That is why we also tend to overreact. And thirdly, I think our institutions tend to play catch up with market realities. And I've given this example before. So for example, EU sometimes is in the forefront of regulations. Okay. So if you look at laws in Europe on who is liable, they distinguish between Uber and Airbnb. They're saying in Uber sets the price. You are Uber's customer.
Yes.
Therefore, Uber is liable. In Airbnb's case, Airbnb is merely a matching service. The price is set by the vendor, the owner of the property. And therefore, you are the customer of that vendor, and Airbnb is merely a broker. These nuances, Indian institutions or regulators around the world have to deal with. And therein lies a challenge. So if you look at some of our historical legacy, sociological issues of low trust, institutional catch-up, I think that explains a lot of what ought to happen and why it's happening slower than we would like.
So basically, the colonial legacy and a mindset that comes along with it, an architecture designed for extraction from the population rather than enabling population to succeed, are the points that strike you. Mohan, I'm just asking another very different question. We were just discussing earlier on about Infosys before the meeting started, and it's a tremendous example of scale execution, right? And I'm just curious, is a country where we have things like performance benchmarking, which is the next practice from SEBI, We've got amazing things like GSTN. We have FASTag integrated to GSTN, such large complex systems. And yet today we're struggling with saying, should carry suffer GST or not? What is the status of carry? Is co-investment, it should not be allowed, and all kinds of friction which are very unnatural to this. Why do you think, Mohan, that we are unable to use the same kind of systems thinking and system design that we see in an Infosys to actually make a complete set of laws when we launch something like an AIF policy?
Let me start with where Gaurav stopped, because I don't agree fully with Gaurav. Yes, the British were extractive, but we had Indian businessmen who joined with them to extract and earn their money, and they made business. See, our biggest issue was when we got independence in 47, we are the biggest economy in Asia. China was destroyed, Southeast Asia was destroyed, Japan was destroyed, right? We had 1.5 billion pounds as money due from Great Britain. Then we had the first government where the first prime minister decided in wisdom, we're going to follow the socialistic model of government, bring in pricing controls, license quota Raj. He shifted the entire intellectual argument to that of a big state which determines the economic policy of a country, for a country which for thousands of years, ever since it was conceptualized, was the free market economy. We were a trading country. Before the British came, we were among the two largest economies in the world. We were a rich country. Then, of course, the British looted us and took away wealth, $45 trillion as per some academics, etc. So this issue of a mindset from Delhi, which is based upon the Fabian School of Economics that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru did, and which was in his famous statement in 56, PSU should have a commanding height of the economy. That is fine, but he also said that business was bad. You have to look at what J.R.D. Tata spoke about the conversation with Pandit Nehru. Profit is bad, this is bad. Gandhi is supposed to have said before he died, this desh mein sarkar vyapari hai, us desh mein janta bikari hai. Between 1950 to 1980, we grew at 3.5% a year. Population grew at 2.5% a year. 1980, we opened up, we grew at 5.5% a year till 1990, 80 to 90. 91, we opened up, we have grown at 8.6% a year in dollar terms, from 91 $275 billion to $2.93 trillion in 2020 March. It just shows. And now that mentality and the culture that government knows everything, government is the pater for everybody, government will take care of everything. We have the wisdom, that intellectual arrogance of the collector class, and all this is still there in Delhi. It is coming down because that generation which grew up in the Nehruvian economic policy of state domination is still there. And then Gopal, you know very well, having suffered this, the business class took to it, capitalism came up. Crony capitalism controlled. They allowed the license quota Raj because they could buy the government, they could shut out everybody, and everything was non-competitive. So everybody joined together. The government with the bad policy, the business class who found it works, and only Dhirubhai Ambani had the guts to break it. Remember all this, business is also complicit, Gopal, and they destroyed this country. Now we got economic freedom back. But the mentality and thought process is still there. Now, why can't we design? Now, Infosys grew up as a child of liberalization, because they reduced the controls that inhibit us and stopped us from growing. We had a fantastic management, a dream team. The industry grew because we were exporting outside. Like you said, we didn't suffer from what happens to you in Chennai every other day. And then, we were able to hire people. We were able to raise capital. We had very good ethical management from the educated middle class, not the business class, which could not build a company like, Infosys at that point of time. TCS is a great company. And we did very well. Now, why can't government do all this? Thinking has changed, but there is a knowledge asymmetry between government and industry. And the knowledge asymmetry has to be bridged by us. We have to do it. We have to go to government. We have to do some research. We have to produce thought papers, tell government this is state-of-the-art legislation. They listen to us. Gopal, I worked with SEBI on his committees for 20 years. I sat on the board of SEBI. SEBI was instrumental, and the government was instrumental in creating NSE. NSE is a fabulous institution. Broke the stranglehold, the broker class in Mumbai. Manu Manek and all what they used to do. You know all that. You've been through all that. You and I and Gaurav, we've been through all that, right? He broke it. Now we have a fine institution. So we had good regulation for the market. Things have improved, but the mindset is still there. So I want to end by saying the IFC, the classic example of how we created a nation within a nation to take care of foreign investors, because we wanted some scarce commodity called foreign exchange. Dollars cannot be scarce in any country. Brother Montek told us a long time ago. He said the very funny thing. Of course, he is also responsible for that. And now we have to work with government to educate, to create framework, and to earn trust. And for that, Gopal, we need to understand what are the fears of government. Government believes businessmen are crooks. A lot of data. Look at the 15 lakh NPA. They rob the bank and run away.
Absolutely.
Government believes that to protect the investors. So we have to do this. So we have to work together as government, create a framework, educate each other, understand the difficulty, bring in regulations, and it will work.
I just compute once again. Gaurav, I want to ask you
A
this
little bit more
question.
time,
I just want to go from where Mohan was speaking. If there are 5 different parts of government, CBDT, CBIC, MCA, SEBI, RBI, and they're creating this AIF framework, which brings in far more money, right, than the entire IPO industry. I have never been in a discussion, and I've been policy making now for like 12 years, right? And AIF, that all 5 departments call us together, and we don't have a throw it over the wall kind of policy making, but we have a cohesive, systematic policy making, so that we don't have, for example, one rate of tax for listed shares, another rate of LTCG for shares where large risks are taken, like venture capital. What is your view, Gaurav? What does it take to make this change happen, going from your colonial mindset theory and to Mohan has beautifully segued it to the present?
I think it's a question of integration and a question of priority. Integration is very often the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. The left hand doesn't know what the priorities of the right hand are. And we keep adding laws to solve narrow problems. And when you step away from the painting, you see maybe this painting is a mess. But when you're close, it seems like a good solution, patchwork solution. I think that's what many economies suffer from. And I think that's what some of these regulations lead to. Also, regulations don't have sunset clauses and so on and so forth. So they sometimes become out of date. So I think a holistic approach is required. And I think industry needs to help government build trust with government to say, look, what we are proposing is not necessarily self-serving. It is good for all the constituents, which means for business, for consumers, for society at large. And that confidence needs to be built. These ideas need to be socialized both ways, by business to government and by government to business before ideas get done. And one more point I want to make, which again, Gopal, we've discussed. Legislation is a full-time job. We've found very often that the executive function tends to dominate. Okay, and we've seen that, and I'll give you an example of railways. When private freight was allowed, railways, which was an executive function, was also setting up legislation for freight, for private freight operators. Okay? So we need to very clearly distinguish between what the legislative functions are and let legislatures act without the pressures of the executive, which is how good laws get made. So that would be my one submission, other than good trust and interaction between government and business.
So don't let Nirav Modi's behavior make laws. Do it more systematically through a dialogue. Mohan, I was just
Nirav Modi is an outlier. We should not treat Nirav Modi as a representative sample.
Exactly.
For God's sake.
Make all corner case since the use cases became the prime. Mohan, I'm just curious, right? Do you really think that the government has the ability? I was reading the Parthasarthi Shom report before this meeting from 2014. 385 recommendations, out of which 291 are pertaining to CBDT. One of them saying that CBDT should have a several 100% research pool, and that CBDT should not be responsible for collecting tax. They should be responsible for collection, not for a collection target, but for a collection compliance. Do you think the government has the ability? We do all of this, but where will they get it? For example, in GST, what is performance carry? What is performance fee? What is carry? What do you do in a fund which has got zero fee and only carry? What do you do in a fund which has got zero carry and only fee? Where will they develop these expertise, and what should be our role as an association in doing this?
Gopal, the biggest law in our system of governance is that the political leaders are not up to speed about what this country requires. Now, we are a very varied country. We got people living in the 18th century, 19th century, 20th century, and we are in the 21st century. The politicians, political leaders have to take care of everybody. And in democracy, you have to be seen as anti-rich, anti-business, pro-poor. And the talk has to be that, and you've got to do something to beat up the rich, right? Because, being rich means exploitative, blah, blah, blah. That is the thinking. And that is the culture that has been ingrained over the last 50, 60 years. Now, we have to work with political leaders, and we have to be close to them, and we have to fund the political process of elections. Give money to the political leaders. openly and not ask for favors. Now, you can't treat political leaders as, in a step-padali matter, dirty people who use dirty money. They're the ones who are in between us and the bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is self-centered. They want power. They're not going to change. They're comfortable. They don't want to work. You know what they are. And that's been there. And all of the country, all of the world is the same. If the political leaders bring change, look at India. 1991, Narasimha Rao brought the change, along with Manmohan Singh. Vajpayee brought the change. Later in 2004, he gave us all the highways. Now Narendra Modi is bringing the change. The 25% tax, where do you think it came from? It didn't come from the FM. It came from Narendra Modi, who told them, I want this done in 48 hours. It was done, right? You see the speed of change. And then who gave the 30% tax? PC Chidambaram gave it to us. Chidambaram said, I want to do this. He did it, right? Now, political leaders are the key. We have to meet political leaders. We have to convince them. But sadly, the bureaucracy scares the political leaders. They go to the FM and say, oh, I've been through this. Because, one income tax officer who's a close friend of mine, when we're talking about the SC, that said, oh, they see that government will lose 1,50,000 crores for 10 years if we give the shared benefits. And he scared the FM. And now the FM has to be spoken to. We have to meet with them. We have to work with them. It's a political decision that they have to take. Our interaction, political leaders, has to improve. And the sad part of any government is they must have a group of advisors who are from the private sector or ordinary citizens without vested interest. And they must listen to them, listen to the bureaucracy, and take the decision. It doesn't mean that we are the ones driving force, because the political leaders have to take care of everybody. Whereas we may be talking about our industry and what we want, because industry wants no taxes, they want to be billionaires, and they don't want any regulations. Screw the consumer. I mean, sorry about the language. You understand how mentality is, right? They have to balance every interest. But we have to interact more with political leaders. We have to improve the political process, because change will come not from the bureaucracy, will only come from the political leadership, the decision they have to take. And that is why the gap between us and the political leaders have to be bridged. And the bureaucracy will take the cues from there.
But how do you think our association, IVCA, has been a spectacularly successful?
I will tell you. See, IVCA should interact with the finance minister more and more. IVCA should interact with the economic ministries more and more. IVCA should do research and create public opinion about the benefits of all this. They must use the media to effectively put the message. They must seek meeting with the Prime Minister and explain why our association and our industry is creating great leadership. I was speaking to Sanjeev Sanyal, and he had a very interesting take, Gopal. He said, in the earlier era, the business leaders robbed money from the banks, get an NPS, and brought in equity. For the first time, India in its economic history is seeing young entrepreneurs raise equity the right way, invest it the right way, and create economic growth the right way, not with the bank's debt or robbing the banks, but putting money to work in a very transparent, open manner. You understand? And we are leading the way. And that's why we are 72 unicorns today. He said India has changed because of his young entrepreneur class. Now, Gopal, possibly you and I, our generation was between the control generation of of Nehru, and then the open liberal economy after 91, right? We are straddling both worlds. But today, the generation that is becoming entrepreneurs, people in the late 20s or 30s or early 20s, they're born in the free market economy, in the liberalized economy. They're doing things the right way. Look at the change in mindset. We all have long lives. Our memories are long. So we are seeing the change. So we must work with political leaders, showcase them. Gopal, you remember when Prime Minister Modi called all the startup entrepreneurs to the startup function in Vignan Bhavan maybe 5-6 years ago. All these young entrepreneurs sat on the dais. We didn't sit on the dais. None of the old-timers, big houses were there. That was the change. So we must interact more, Gopal. That's the key.
So, Gaurav, what you're saying is so much good stuff is happening. At 31st unicorn born last week, 50 billion in investments, lot more funds, right? Country is now looking at startups. If you look at the square centimeter space on Economic Times or Mint, it's increasing only every day on startup coverage. Private capital allocations are going so substantially higher. All this stuff we know very well. So a lot of good things are clearly happening. But yet, as an industry, in your opinion, Mohan has talked about research, interacting with finance minister, prime minister. Your advice as a family office leader, as a business leader, as an intellectual, what is your advice to the association? Guys, do more of this? What does you want so that the balance of regulation like this GST issue, co-investment issue, not having one single rate of capital gains tax for listed and unlisted, what do you think we should be doing and what are we doing, not doing?
See, Gopal, I think one point I would make is if you see how an average senior person in the Ministry of Finance or in government is spending his time, business is a small set of their considerations. Private equity and venture capital is a small set of business considerations, even within business, right? So, what your and my priority might be may or may not be the most important A-level item for a government bureaucrat or a minister or person in that power. And guess what? If we were in that position, we would act probably in a similar manner. So, one way to do it is we'll have to repeat our message. Okay. Secondly, I think we'll need to articulate the benefits. Very often, what I see is we give a list of demands without making people understand what the benefits for the larger community might be. For example, how will change in tax rates help the business ecosystem at large? So I think if we were to articulate this, we will get their attention, and it may require some repetition. Sometimes we get a feeling from business, from government, is that business talks in a self-serving manner. So we need to make sure that we don't get perceived that we are talking in a self-serving manner.
Of course, I think but it's only fair, isn't it, Gaurav, that ultimately any industry body will be seen as self-serving. The question is, are we doing enough? Are we what can we do differently in your opinion? Should we do more research? Should we supplement those lack of research as experts in the tax departments? How can we make a difference?
I think we should, in addition to what we are doing, which I think we are doing a very good job here, I think we also need to bring best practices from around the world and showcase to the government. Okay. That this is what's happening vis-a-vis entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley. This is the flexibility that people are given on a cap table. In most countries in the world, which flexibility doesn't exist for cap tables in India because of archaic laws, for example. This is what the best practice on taxation is. This is how GPs get treated. This is what we are talking about. This is how failure should be treated. So if you look at the old economy, a lot of failure is treated like criminalization now. Okay. This is how failures should be treated and so on. If we can articulate those best practices, I think it'll be easier for the government to internalize.
Well, I want to get to the political issue. I want to get to the political economy, right? Fundamentally, tell me if the Sensex went from whatever 60 to 30 or 25 and there's an election, the ruling party is going to be worried about votes for sure. Why will a politician worry what happens to the VCP industry, even though this government has done a ton of stuff? They said ERDA money can go to fund of funds. ERDA meaning insurance money can go to fund of funds. They've created this amazing organization, NIF, right? They fundamentally created LP money to flow from even private pensions into fund of funds. They've done a lot. We still think there are a couple of things left. But as a politician, why would they worry? Is it an intellectual conversation between Mohandas, Pai and Gopal and Gaurav and the politicians? Why should I worry? Why will I lose my vote because of you?
Gopal, the biggest problem for the political leadership and the country is jobs. Who is producing jobs today? We are producing jobs. We are one of the largest job producers. We must show them all the jobs we produce. We must tell them the kind of jobs you produce, the kind of salaries we're giving, kind of income you're doing, the kind of taxes. We must compile all that and say, this is what we're doing now, this is what we're doing 5 years from now. That's what we did in NASSCOM. In NASSCOM, exactly we did that. We spoke to the government and said, we're the largest producer of job for the middle class and we are treating well. Come to our campus and see what we do and see why foreign presidents and prime ministers are coming to Bangalore to visit Infosys and plant trees. We did all that. And the media was on our side. We had Devang Mehta create that romance and the magic there. Yeah, so you need...
Devang was amazing.
So Rajat has to become a Devang Mehta. I told Rajat that he has to, possibly, become a fashion model of whatever he has to do. Get the glamour in. So we have to do all that, right? So we have to say, we are solving the country's problem of job creation. We are solving the country's problems of creating more productivity. We are bringing the latest technology in the world here. We are creating wealth for society. We're actually doing that. We got to talk about it. We got to get the media on our side. We must speak to the editors of newspapers because people still read newspapers, besides social media, and talk to
That's
them.
right.
I'm sure they also want to write. So we must do all that without making it, puffing it up, like some people say. We must have academics come and write about it so that it happens, right? All the things important. For example, the Zomato IPO has really changed the whole nature, right, of the entire market about people going to IPO. I hope people like Zomato become much more become leaders who can talk to analysts and make sure they
Right.
create the right kind of profile of companies that don't make cash flow profits for the next few quarters. So it's very important. So I think all this has to be done. That means you and Gaurav and other leaders like Rajat and Renuka have to work together to create that. That is where more time. You must spend 30-40% of your time doing all that, creating public opinion, talking about the jobs that you do, etc. You understand? That, I think that is the cue. We got to step it up by 5x to get 5x of what you want.
I'm
Gopal,
just
if I
sorry.
might add,
Yeah, please, Gaurav.
I think what's happening is this new economy entrepreneurship is helping entrepreneurship at large. So think about some fellow in Merit. He's looking at these new world entrepreneurs, new economy entrepreneurs, and saying, well, I can be an entrepreneur as well. And he may not become a unicorn. He may start a small services business, right? So I think this trend towards entrepreneurship is flowing from the big unicorns to small towns as well. Today, I mean, if you looked at it 30 years ago, okay, the best job was probably a government job. Okay. Then it went to, can I get a job in a large company? I think this is already changing. A lot of people in small towns are willing to work for small entrepreneurs because they think of those small entrepreneurs as worthy, who will pay them and they'll have job security and so on. So I think this ecosystem is flowing.
Absolutely. So I'm just, so we're in this very, interesting position. I feel sometimes like Alice in Wonderland, right? Because you're living in a country which is giving you Aadhaar, giving you UPI, you've done the COVID app, you've done GST, you've done FASTag, you've integrated it. I couldn't send a foreign payment on my credit card because my LRS is linked to my credit card. This is an amazing country. Huge reforms, especially in the COVID period. This government has been fabulous, right? And yet we are saying, oh gosh, the laws of GST for carry and performance fees are not being well put together. Some Bangalore CESTAT is deciding the future of the entire industry by a group of people who have no clue even what is the difference between A and B, right? So we have this phenomenal paradox, which is this wonderful country called India, which is what has been our culture all the time. So I'm hearing from you 4-5 different things, right? If I take your recommendations, first is let the founders of startups and leaders go around making sure the benefits of job creation, innovation, national security, which are all coming out of startups, are widely known. Second is meet all the members of parliament, maybe some MLAs, etc. Make sure they understand the industry, make sure they understand why in the long term, their votes also depend on this industry. If they do a great job, they should be talking about startups in their constituencies, in their political speeches. मैंने startup को back किया, मैंने VCP funds को पैसा दिया. It should be a part of the political dialogue. The third thing we're saying is IBCA should become, Mohan is saying, more like a SRO, where it fundamentally provides research papers to the industry, to the bureaucrats to understand issues rather than say, people, they all call us Mangta Ram, right? Ye mango, wo mango, mangte hi rehte hain, to Mangta Ram ban gaye. We have to go from that to basically providing ideas. And of course, the piece the resistance of what Mohan has been emphasizing is see the Prime Minister and explain in person. This is one guy who absolutely gets it and who has the wisdom to know what to do and the courage to get it done, all rolled in this guy. And the example of 25%, I fully endorse it. I think we have a great leader in Mr. Modi, and I do hope that we do get to have that meeting. So we've got 4 strong recommendations in the table. With this, I just want to ask 1 or 2 recommendations from you, Gaurav. If you had to have a big phone call with the Prime Minister at the end of this meeting, what is the 1 or 2 things specifically pertaining to our industry that you are going to ask for?
I would say simplify entrepreneurship, which means allow flexibility on the cap tables. Second, I would say simplify the AIF structure. There are way too many regulations. There are barriers to entry which are unnecessary. So these would be my 2 asks.
Super. Mohan, your phone call to the Prime Minister, which probably anyway you do every day, but let us know in this particular phone call what you'll do.
I will say remove the discrimination in the taxation against Indian residents who are staying back, building this country, who are the face of New India and building digital India. We are discriminated against. We are heavily taxed. Remove it, strengthen us to do everything else. That'll be my first ask. Second ask is please give us time every 2 months to talk to you about what we have done and to get your thoughts and to request you for what needs to be done to do 2x of what we did last quarter. These are the only two things I will ask. Because today, being an Indian resident, this government discriminates against us. They treat us like shit. If you're a foreign investor, nothing wrong with the foreign investor. I love their money. I love them. But they get a favorable treatment, rightly so. But we too get the treatment. Look at the capital gains. It's so absurd. And then the finance minister goes and puts 35% tax on the. How can it be more absurd? Corporate taxation for corporate income is 25% is surcharge. For long-term capital, it's 28%.
That's right.
Correct. So capital should not be capital in a capitalist case country should be treated differently. So I do the two things I'll ask.
That's absolutely perfect. So, like Nachiketa, you will not leave till you come back every 2 months and get more and more gyan and give more and more gyan. That's really beautiful.
No, because Gopal, who gave you the vision of digital India? Prime Minister. Who gave the visit of who gave you the vision of startup India? Prime Minister. Who gave the vision of stand up India? Prime Minister. And from the roster of the Red Fort on Independence Day, I think 2015 or so, right? He gave it to us. So we have a right to go to him as a leader and say, you have given this to us. We have done so much. We need this. And we will do 10x that. Please help us. I'm sure he'll do it. He's very proud of this industry. He's very proud of this.
Proud of the country, proud of India. Yesterday, we released a book on Tamil quotes given by Prime Minister in his various speeches. So that is the diversity of the man. So I just think it's fantastic. So my ask would be exactly what both my colleagues said. Definitely have a single rate of long-term capital gains tax for foreigners, Indians, listed and unlisted shares very, very clearly. And the second thing is obviously to make sure that the AIF rules are absolutely on par with IFSC rules. IFSC and domestic AIF rules are the same, and not all these discriminations go away. We are in a good place. Capital is flowing. I see young, talented fund managers in the VCP industry, and I just keep saying, wow. We see the changes of long LP money from PPF, PFRDA, maybe at some point, ERDA, allowing fund of funds money, NIF, great institution. SEBI, whether we like it or not, under Madhavi Puri Puj, phenomenal sets of new regulations. Some of them, like performance benchmarking, which is done by Narayan Murthy committee, are absolutely not just the best practice, they are the next practice. So lots of good stuff are going, few things to remain. IBCA must do something different. We must get Mohan and others to help us to get to the Prime Minister. And we must ultimately say the real food that we produce is the jobs, the innovation, the national security, and most importantly, not just Atmanirbhar Bharat, but Atma Vishwas Bharat through all these young men and women. So thank you all, and thank you, Mohan. Thank you, Gaurav.
We are the future, Gopal. We are the future.
Absolutely.
We are the future.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you very much. And I think we come to the end of it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gopal. Thank you, Mohan.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Thank you, gentlemen, for that power-packed session. There is a lot of takeaway, but one big takeaway is that there is a whole roster of to-dos for IVCA going forward in terms of what they can achieve. So again, I think it was a wonderful session, and thank you so much for the insights.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.